Hello. So I'm going to start off this vlog just by briefly telling you about A Drop of Venom. This is a book that wasn't on my TBR, but I added it at the very end of the month to pre-read it for my niece because there's an on-page sexual assault that happens, and before I passed it on to her, I was reading it to make sure that it was going to be fine for her to read, and it was supposed to be like tacked on at the end of January. I didn't end up finishing it in time, but just like right after, so it's still a January book. But anyway, a couple of people mentioned that you did want to hear my final thoughts on it. So just super quick, A Drop of Venom is the Medusa story with Indian lore. So the author mentioned in the author's note that she always felt that Medusa's story was unfair. Like, it was unjust how she was treated and how she was vilified after what happened to her. And so this is a different look, a different take on that story. So we follow Manisha, who is a Gara? Naga. I knew I was remembering that wrong. She's a Naga, and her people have been pushed out and mistreated, so she's gone to work at the temples, and it's supposed to be a place that keeps her safe. We also follow a second character who he's a monster hunter. So anyway, Manisha, she's the main character. She's the story. This is her story that we're following, even though we have dual perspectives. She's at this temple. This is supposed to keep her safe, and she does have, there's actually 2 sexual assaults that happen back to back in this book. One from the monster hunter's perspective, it's a sexual assault that he witnesses and steps in on, and then Manisha, it is an on-page rape that happens. So there's notes at the beginning of the book. The author makes sure to warn her teen readers what is on page here, but it's a very on-page discussion and unpacking of that, as well as look at victimhood, perspectives of victimhood, the way people responding and often responding in a way that we would hope that they would. It's a lot of on-page examination and unpacking and working through. I thought it was handled brilliantly, honestly. It was very intentional and on the nose, you could call it, but in the best way. I think that a teen who's reading this for some sort of understanding or validation would find this book extremely cathartic. I did not end up passing this on to my niece specifically because of the kind of content that she was wanting, so I didn't pass this on to her, but I would recommend this, especially for anyone who wants to read this with their teen and have these discussions with them. I think that it was really, really well written. I also just think that the story itself is very good. The prose is very well written. It's a story of trauma and resilience, of family, sisterhood, and healing, and also vengeance. It is a YA fantasy book, and while it's outside of what I typically read, I think that it accomplished everything that it wanted to accomplish extremely well. So that was technically a January book. Then, as my first book in February, I have started this nonfiction, Into the Wild, and I don't like it. I mean, it started out really strong. We're following this kid who goes into the wild. It's a journey of self-discovery, and it's a journey of survival, and he's trying to, I don't know, find something greater. And it started off interesting enough, seeing that he's like going into the wilderness with nothing but a 20 pounds of rice, a 20-pound bag of rice, and that he is confident that even though he's not going with any sort of weapons that are going to help him hunt properly, he's like, I'll figure it out. Like, it's just like this naivete that he's going in with. But as the story progresses, I'm realizing, oh no, I don't like what this story is doing. It's a nonfiction. I don't like what this narrative is doing. Anyway, before I launch into a rant, I'm gonna finish the book and then come back just in case the rant is unwarranted. I hope it turns around. Anyway, welcome to the vlog. Hello. So I finished the book. I finished the Into the Wild, the nonfiction, and I did not like it. I will preface this by saying this has a 4-star rating on Goodreads. People like it, so if you want to read it, don't let me be the reason that you don't. So I think the main reason I didn't like it is because of the way it was written. It's the narrative and the narrative structure and the way everything was presented. So Chris McCandless is the focus of the book, and this is presented as his story, and it's this brave young man that goes out into the wilderness and he faces all odds, and what is it in a young man that makes the wilderness call to him and makes this sense of adventure and danger call to him to go into these risky situations to find a better way. So that's how the narrative kind of presents itself. But what we actually get is a story about a guy he's smart, he's athletic, he's charismatic, people love him. Everybody that comes across him has great opinions about him, but he's senseless. He went into the wilderness unprepared, but with a bag of rice and hunting equipment that would not do the job. When people warned him, hey, we live here, and like, we know this wilderness, you will not survive like this, his response was essentially, I think I can figure it out. If you don't know what this is about, this is a nonfiction. It's a true story of a young man who goes out into the wilderness to survive, and he doesn't. He ends up dying. So it is a pretty straightforward story in the fact that, this isn't a rescue story. This isn't a survival story. This is a tragedy. It's truly sad. But at the same time, it's weird to me that the author kind of has this tone of like admiration and of, the wonder that draws a man and facing all odds. People train for years to become adept at survival. People work hard to build skills to help them to survive in difficult situations and learn lessons from putting themselves in that scenario. People work hard to learn how to live in these sort of situations in a way that works with nature instead of destroying it while they're trying to conquer it. Chris didn't do any of those things. He had no training. He didn't work for skills that would help him survive. He just went into the wilderness, was warned, this is a hopeless venture, said, I'll figure it out, and then it was a tragedy. And that is a really sad story, but the way it's framed is so weird to me. It's almost like, look at this thing that this man accomplished, and it's sad that he didn't come out the other side alive, but wow. I just don't quite understand why this one was a book. I understand it being a newspaper article, a blog post, even a YouTube video if you want to keep a lot of the interviews, but a full book I don't know about. And that brings me to my second complaint, which is the narrative structure of this, not just the narrative line and framing, but the structure as well, because we have Chris's story, and then we go on these side tangents about other people who have also gone into adventure and died, and how their stories are mildly kind of similar to Chris's, and so we can draw these comparisons because I need more pages in this book. And also, let me tell you a little bit about my own story and my own inklings, because I need to fill pages. Now I'm being facetious because I'm a little bit grumpy. I don't actually think the author added this stuff to fill pages, but that's how it felt to me. And I don't think, again, a blog post would have made sense. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I do think that Chris's story is sad, and there are some things to examine in it, but the way it was framed in this book didn't make sense to me. I felt like I was reading a different story than the author was writing. Again, it's well loved, so who am I and what do I know? But I personally didn't like this nonfiction. I've read many similar to it that I have liked much, much more. I started Chess Story. Let me go grab it. I didn't grab it because I was too fixated on talking about Into the Wild. Hang on. Okay, I started Chess Story, which is an Austrian classic. So I am shocked. This is a very short book, and I'm shocked at how quickly you can see how far I am, even though the pencil fell out. I'm shocked at how quickly this has gripped me. As someone who doesn't play chess and doesn't have a lot of interest in chess, the very detailed description of the games that they're playing are written so well, and there's a lot beyond just we're playing chess. There's a lot that's going into it that makes it so gripping. So we have a world champion chess player who's on a ship, he's on the ocean, and he plays a game of chess, and another character, another person, a lawyer, kind of inserts himself into the game and shows extraordinary skill and talent. And that whole scene was so good, even for someone who isn't interested in the game. It was so gripping, it was so well written. Now we're actually examining how the lawyer gained this unique skill, gained this very strong skill, and it was through a really terrible time in his life. The way this author is describing isolation is just as gripping and evocative as how he describes a game of chess. It's completely got me gripped. I don't know anything about this story yet, so that's just the intro, first initial thoughts. I will come back to you either maybe later today. I started this yesterday. I'll probably finish it today. I'll come back to you when I finish this to wrap up the vlog with my final thoughts. But those are my initial just, wow, what is this story? And I'll see you either later today or tomorrow with my final thoughts. Okay, I finished this. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop reading this little bitty novella about chess, but no, about so much more than chess. Okay, so when I was giving you my quick initial, I've read less than half of this, like 40 pages. Here's what's going on. Let me restart. Let me tell you about it again. Okay. So we're told this story from the perspective of a man who cares about chess, is passionate about chess, considers himself good at chess, but from the perspective of someone who's, I'm good at this thing. I'm good at this sport. I'm good at this hobby. And then I get in the proximity of a great, and I realize I'm an idiot and I know nothing. Anyway, he's on this ship with a pro, with a great of chess. And what he does is he organizes this game, and it has to be funded. It has to be paid for, because this man who's a pro, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to play you for fun. I'm a professional. So $250 a match. And they pay. Well, one guy pays. And so it's a group of guys who get together, and it's them against him. So they all huddle together, and they can deliberate. They can decide together, okay, what's the next move? And then our pro, he goes off and he does whatever while he waits for them to figure out their next move. They make their next move. He comes over to the table, he moves, and then he goes and does his own thing while they deliberate together. So it's all these guys, these like 8 guys together trying to strategize as a team how to beat this master, and they're pummeled. It's terrible. But one random fella, the lawyer that I told you about, he quietly comes in from the back and he's like, no, don't make that move. That's not the move. And it turns out that he had been watching quietly, and he not only knew what the best next move was, but he actually had strategized the game out like 8 moves in advance and was far beyond any of their caliber, to the point that he might actually be a fair match against this world renowned pro. So then we learn what got this man to the point that he was capable of such greatness in the realm of chess. And that launches us into his backstory of being someone who had a position of reputation during Nazi Germany, and he was actually taken captive and tortured for information. He was put in a room by himself and only pulled out to have interrogation after interrogation, and then isolated again. And it wore him down to the point of it's hard to, okay, let me back up a little bit. The way this chess match was described was so gripping, and if you asked me to play chess with you, not only would I lose, I don't care how good you are, I would lose. I also probably wouldn't know the rules. I played a couple times in middle school because my friends liked chess. That's how much I know about this game, and yet reading the description of these characters playing this game was so gripping. The writing of this little novella and drawing you into the intensity of the topic. Doesn't matter what the topic is, it draws, at least it drew me in. Then match that same intensity and skill at depicting something that we need to focus on and pay attention to. Match that to isolation torture. So we are here with this character, with Dr. B. We're here with him day in and day out as he, for a series of probably 40 to 50 pages, it felt longer, in the best way, in this isolation, in this torture. And it would describe things like him watching a raindrop and how that affected him, watching that drop fall down the window and how encompassed in it was, that was his life, that was his everything. And then when it was gone, how devastating that was for him, counting all the buttons on coats, stealing a book so that he just had something, anything to hold on to while he was alone. The book that he stole was a book on chess, and that then became his one companion in his isolation, his one solace, his one escape, to the point that on his checkered bedspread, he started playing chess with stale old bread that he was given to eat. Those were the pieces. And then he started playing chess in his mind, constantly coming up with the moves, not needing the physical representation anymore. He could just play games in his head day in and day out. That was what kept his mind strong. That was the thing that he fixated on to keep him alive while he was being interrogated for this information. He near broke before he had chess as a companion to keep him going. Sorry I'm being so intense. This novella was really intense to read. So now we're back to present day, and we're having a one-on-one match between Dr. B and the chess pro. And I won't tell you how the match goes, and I won't tell you what this leads us to, because I think I've already given you more than enough for a story so short. It's a story of psychological torture, of psychological resilience, of psychological unraveling. At least that's what I got from it. I mean, it's devastating. It's so gripping to read. I couldn't put it down, but it's also tragic. It's so tragic. I went into this knowing nothing about it. One of my subscribers sent this to me years ago, actually. It's taken me a really long time to finally pick it up. And I didn't even know the premise of this. I went into it completely unaware of what this book would be, other than probably a little bit about chess. So I also don't know any sort of background on this. I don't know the history. I don't know what the professionals say about what this book novella is doing and what it accomplishes, and, you know, I don't know. So I'd like to look into that, because I found this so compelling. It's hard to explain. The feeling of hopelessness and despair and isolation and obsession was just written so effectively in this tiny little book. And this is translated, so I gotta give props to the translator as well, Joel Rottenberg. In general, I'm just amazed. Forgive me if you know this better than I do, and you probably have better discussion points and a better interpretation than I do. I just, as someone with fresh eyes and no foreknowledge, wow. I'll look into it a little bit more, though, so that I can be a better conversationalist someday if I meet someone on the street that wants to talk about chess story. I would love to hear from you if you've read this, if you've studied it, if you have some insight that if you want to discuss it with me. I would really like that. I'd love to hear your interpretation on it and what you took from it and what it meant to you. But that's all I read this week. I finished a book that I started last week, Drop of Venom. I read a nonfiction, Into the Wild. I personally didn't enjoy it. And then I read a chess story, or just chess story, and I loved it. Chat with me about any of these in the comments if you'd like. I feel like my reading went through a roller coaster this week, but I would love to chat with you more about any of these books. I post videos every Tuesdays and Thursdays on this channel, sometimes on Saturdays. I'm changing my outro, by the way. I'm not going to say Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, because sometimes I don't have a spoiler review to give you. So I'll just do it when, a spoiler-free wouldn't be effective enough. Like in a sequel where I can't go deep into things, those will get spoilers, or just something that I love so much that I must discuss for an hour. Anyway, I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday, and sometimes on Saturdays on this channel, Mondays and Fridays on the manga channel. I'll see you again soon. Bye.